And we are live with the show today, Cocktails and Conversations with your host. That's me, Doug Crow. I have got probably one of the most interesting guests I've had on in quite some time. She's giggling in the background here. I'm going to bring her on in a second. It's not often that I do stuff on current events because I don't watch the news. I'm like, and I try to stay on Facebook, but I'm not immune to what's going on in the world. And so when one of my friends and clients has the credentials you're about to hear, I'm like, holy crap, do we have to talk? Master's in communication, PhD in psychology, former law enforcement officer in Chicago. I'd like to introduce my friend and future best-selling author, Ms. Karen Bartuch. How you doing, Karen?
Excellent. Thanks so much for that great introduction.
Is that all right?
Yes, that's
Works?
great.
All right.
You're hiring. Hey.
Yeah. Hey, could you tilt your camera down a little bit? You look like a hobbit.
Yeah.
And we know you're probably like 6 foot tall or something. I know you're not a hobbit.
I am
So
6 feet tall, yes.
See, I'm telling you.
Is that better?
Much better. Much better.
Like a floating head.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful head. Listen, there's a lot I want to cover. I don't really have any agenda. This is called
Sure.
Cocktails and Conversations. I know you have coffee because it's 3 o'clock in Chicago, but it's 4 o'clock here, so I'm having a gin and tonic, which maybe disguised as tonic water. I don't know. Anyway.
Gin and tonic, hold the gin.
Hold the gin, that's right. Seriously, there's all this stuff going on, and I'm not sure where to start. So I want to get your maybe broad perspective on this current events. And then we can drill down to 2 or 3 areas I'm thinking about. From all your three experiences, psychology, communications, and law enforcement. There's 3 big things that we can all drive into. But give me your overview on what's going on right now.
Yeah, it's such a complex issue, and I try to see it from all different sides. And I do see it from all different sides. And for instance, today the news came out that 2 of the officers that were involved in the George Floyd incident only had 4 days on the job.
Jeez.
Yeah, and so I was talking to my brother, who is almost a 30-year veteran of the police department. He actually just retired in the wake of COVID. And what are those guys supposed to do? It's a very hierarchical chain of command organization.
Right.
You have 4 days on the street, which means you have no power, no influence, no authority whatsoever. What are you supposed to do? I mean, so it's just a hard, but then I see it from the other side too, that, a person was blatantly murdered on camera. He's calling for help. I mean, so I see it from all sides. It's just a complex issue, and there's so many tensions on both sides.
Right.
The problem, though, that I see is that this happens. There's this huge flare-up, and then in a few days, you cannot maintain that level of angst. Nobody can for that long.
Right.
Maybe some people do. But it's difficult to maintain that level of angst for so long that it's going to die down,
right,
and then it's going to happen again. So that's the part that I struggle with.
That's I think again the sociological, anthropological, cultural angle. This whole thing is there's these big spikes because we have horrible memory, right? We're like goldfish. We're like, okay, it's craziness. Let me ask you one thing that I was really curious about. This is like a small issue, but it came up. I'm like, wait a minute, you were trained, and we talked about how you got training and real life scenarios and whatnot. And I'm pretty sure you mentioned this. If not, correct me, but the way you restrain somebody can be done in a non-lethal manner.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And actually, the Chicago Police Department was really good about talking about this excited delirium where you're high on drugs and you're more at risk. And then also positional asphyxia. They talked about that a lot. So there's actually a general order against hog tying people, so where their hands would be behind their back.
Right.
Almost the position that Floyd was in, except his feet wasn't in the tied up as well.
Right.
They were really big about that in the academy. I mean, they talked about deaths that had occurred, because that's not the first death that has occurred that way.
Sure.
So they were really strict about that, Chicago. I don't know about other police departments, but they were very strict, and we were very aware of that type of risk when restricting somebody. You have to be. I mean, they could have anything wrong in the world. Asthma, could have led to that. So you have to be careful. Yeah. And putting somebody in restraints, their stress level is high, their blood pressure is high. There's a lot of things at risk. And really, even though you're taking them into custody, it is your job to then take care of them.
Right. Yeah. You put your head down. You got to make sure he's safe. Yeah. All those things.
Yeah. They're now in your custody, and you have to take care of them. So for 9 minutes or 8.5 minutes or whatever length, it was way too long.
Right.
It just was.
And is a knee on the neck a standard restraint method? That sounds weird to me.
No. I didn't learn that tactic in the academy. Absolutely not. Yeah. If you study hand-to-hand combatives or mixed martial arts, certainly a choke or something would come up, but that's not something that was taught in the police department.
Right.
No. No. Anybody knows that if you put pressure on the brachial artery and the carotid artery, you're going to pass out, or in this case, die.
Right. Because it was autopsy's heart attack. Is that right? From what I read or something like that? Or?
Yeah, I don't, because I know the family had one done too, so I don't know all the facts there. But
right.
I mean, even if you bring a prisoner into the lockup and they're like, I don't feel good, you have to take them to the hospital. Even if you can blatantly tell they're totally fine, they're young, they're in good health. Yeah. If they're saying they don't feel good, you still have to take them to the hospital. So you have to. And if people cry wolf, and that happens, and they know that the hospital is a better experience than the jail experience, so they're gonna say that to get out of jail. But you have to take it serious. You just have to. I mean, even on a human-to-human level, you have to take that serious.
Certainly. Okay.
Yeah.
So because the carotid artery takes out blood flow to the brain. There's the chokehold. It's not asphyxia because the trachea is here, and I didn't watch the video, so I'm uninformed here. I don't know if you watched it or not.
I did watch the video. Yeah. Right. Not the entire video, but the part where he's gasping for air, saying he can't breathe, calling for his mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you would have hoped that the other officers would have done something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it seemed like they were all in an agitated state, and they were more worried about what was going on externally. I think they thought that the guy had him under control, and let's pay more attention to the crowd versus to the prisoner.
Right. Okay. All right. So
it's just a tough situation. But yeah, that was absolutely not taught in any police academy. In fact, they taught the exact opposite, and to be careful and positional asphyxia. And I even remember that now, years later, that if somebody's on their stomach, regardless of how you're restraining them, they could be at risk.
Okay.
I mean, think of people who are claustrophobic and how uncomfortable they start to feel.
Right.
So like that mental angst starts to become physical, and then you're restrained, and then you've got a knee on your neck. There's so many things going on. Yeah.
All right, so that's it's no fun. It's funny. Here we go back to the culture now, because I don't know of anybody who's like, oh, it's not so bad. I mean, everybody thinks this is a problem, right? I haven't talked to anybody who doesn't think there's an issue here.
Yeah, I think people agree unilaterally that that's not the right thing. Even the most jaded, hardened cops that I know, that usually maybe aren't in that mindset, are like, yeah, it was totally wrong.
Yeah.
So but there are those police, just like there's people amongst all types of groups that are just bad apples. And if you look at the one officer's background, Chauvin, I think that's how you say his last name.
Yeah.
He had 18 complaints against him. You know how many I had in 10 years?
How many?
Million complaints. Zero.
And you're still a badass. You should have had at least one,
Yeah, I had 0 citizen complaints. And I've locked up drug dealers, I've locked up gangbangers, I've done large scale big arrests, I've been involved in big riots and things like that.
Right.
And I had 0 complaints. It comes down to how you treat people. Even if they know they did wrong, but you treat them like a human being, they tend to not complain. It's when you take away their integrity and dignity and respect, then of course they want to come after you and make some sort of complaint.
Yeah. I watched the National Geographic thing the other night. It was a drug bust, and this poor guy that they got him at customs, and they tracked the package back to his house. They're waiting for him all day long. They're like bored out of their skulls. Like, will this guy please come home? And they go to arrest him, and he totally breaks down. He's like, can I go please talk to my wife first and tell her? He felt so bad. They said, sure, man, it's okay. We all have families. So he goes in there with the cuffs on his back and says, honey, I'm going to jail. He got 2 kids, stuff. But they were nice and not just to haul him off. They let him go say goodbye to his wife and kids, so. Yeah, they're human beings.
Yeah. I forgot, I was going to make another point.
About
so the other thing is a lack of training. So a lot of times and I feel like I'm beating up the police here. Believe me, I'm pro-police, I'm pro-military, I support. But in this case, it obviously requires some scrutiny. But when officers aren't trained properly, for instance, on the law and the nuances of the law, they tend to go from 0 to escalation because they think it's going to end the situation. Or like, I have the authority, now I'm going to escalate, put somebody in cuffs, and then it's going to end the situation. Whereas if you know intricately what you can and can't do in the law, then you can maneuver a little bit better out on the street. And so I actually had a training company when I was on the police department called the Women's Tactical Association.
Right.
And we would spend 8 hours breaking down the Illinois law, the statute. So you know what you can and cannot do, what is justified, what would happen if something did happen. And so you have to know those intricacies. And so I do think it comes down to a training issue.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if this guy's like a hard ass. One woman he worked for at the bar said that he tended to OC spray people when that really wasn't required. So there's kind of those people that come on the job because they want that power and authority, and then they go and abuse it.
Yeah, I think we talked about that earlier too. It bears repeating, but it seems like there's two types of people, not three. There's like the people who want to, like you, like I just love to help people, and those who were bullies in high school.
Yeah, bullies, or they were nerds, and they have some authority, and this makes them feel tough.
Yeah.
And I got that sense. I mean, again, I don't know him personally, but from reading about his background and all the complaints and all of that, it sounds like that is kind of his personality. And I've seen those type of coppers.
Right.
And again, going back to those probationary police officers that only had 4 days on the job, it's a tough situation.
Yeah. You know, I read an article about a West Point grad. You talk about honor, right? And they're supposed to it's self-regulated, because if you see one of your classmates doing something wrong, you're supposed to turn them in. And because the code is more important than the person, you know. And now the code for law enforcement is strange because they've got this immunity thing where they're immune from a lot of things that is not immune for citizens. You know about this?
That's less and less, but yeah.
Well, there's a Supreme Court ruling that they're up to. They're getting overturned now. But it's like there's hundreds of cases where the guy did this. Well, we're gonna dock his pay, and for as opposed to like this is criminal activity, but he's got this. There's an immunity piece of this that's in the law for law enforcement.
Yeah, and I would say the other thing is they were big on the police department, Chicago, is that your peace cannot be breached. So I think a lot of times officers get their ego hurt when somebody. So maybe if Floyd was mouthing off, I don't even know in the video if he was or if he was talking back. Officers tend to take that personally. It's like, who cares? Your words don't hurt me. My peace cannot be breached as a police officer. You can say whatever you want. And so I think a lot of times that gets to officers, and they want to take action based on words when it's like, let that stuff go.
Malcolm Gladwell's new book, Talking to Strangers, talks about this.
Really?
Oh my God! I only heard the Joe Rogan podcast on it, so I haven't even finished the book.
Yeah.
But he talks about people aren't talking, they're just reacting to assumptions, and it just there was a gal got pulled over for a taillight, and because she didn't want to roll the window, she didn't comply, blah blah blah. She ended up dying in jail over a broken taillight. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
it just escalates because then people don't know the Fourth Amendment search and seizure law, and then they're pulling people out of cars, and it's just. It escalates. So I think it is a training issue, and I'll say for Chicago, there's 10,000 plus officers, and you would get maybe one training intervention a year.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Maybe some video training, but really they play the video in roll call, and they don't even have the volume up. It's just a check the box activity, and those laws change and get updated. And that's why I formed my own company, a training company, to make sure that my people were trained the very best on paper, physically, mentally, to be ready for the street wherever they work. You couldn't rely on the department to give you the training.
That's crazy to me. All the training goes through our military for things, and what you told me, the training you got as an officer was minimal.
50 rounds. Yeah, you get a box of 50 rounds a year to shoot, and then you go and shoot a piece of paper. 30 rounds, and then that's it.
That's it. Good luck.
Yeah. I mean, and I would argue that the law is even more important to know. In addition to physical training, you need to know the law as well, what you can do, and that stuff's always updating. The other thing I'll say about the officer Chauvin is that everybody kind of knows those officers exist, and usually they won't put a probationary police officer with someone like that because they kind of know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, and again, I'm pro-police, and I feel like I'm beating up the police in this situation.
No, you're beating up the bad guys, and sometimes they wear a uniform. Most of the time they're good. They're here to serve and protect. But like you said, there's a bad apple, and when the green apple next to it has no authority and power, and that hierarchy thing. Oh my gosh, that's probably our next topic, because that's so prevalent in everything in society. And
20 years ago, if this happened, it wouldn't be recorded.
Yeah.
And if an officer spoke up and that the guy that had 4 days on the job spoke up, he would be ostracized by the entire department.
Right.
So it has completely shifted.
Right.
Because that's just how it was. Policing was different. And on the streets in a tough city that he worked in. So what would you have done in that scenario? He's like, I would have pulled the guy off of him.
Yeah, so, hindsight's 20/20. Like you said, there's heightened sense of awareness. And we've talked about that to people. People don't have that calmness in stressful situations. It's tough. It's if you don't have that ability through training, then people normally freak out. They fight or flight. Well, they're going to fight.
Well, yeah, and if you look at his photo in the video compared to his mugshot, he looks like two different people. I don't know if you noticed that. No, I think he was probably at a 10 level in the situation. And even if somebody was saying, get your knee off his neck, which people were, it wasn't even auditory exclusion, wasn't even hearing it.
That's what I want to talk about. Yeah. We talk about that a lot. I think it's really, like you said, I'm just chatting here. So look, we both like just talking. But that's a really good topic to understand that, we can watch a video in our living room and say, oh, horrible. And it is, right? It's like, this was execution by the state, in my opinion. I'm not excusing the guy. No, you aren't either. But we kind of understand how it can happen. Is that
totally? Yeah. And that's why when I had my training company, we did stress inoculation training specifically for that reason. So that if you're
describe that, I think people will find this fascinating.
Yeah, so we would simulate a scenario as realistic as possible using simunition weapons. They look, feel, fire like a real weapon. They fire soap bullets, which hurt. They hurt. I mean, they don't obviously penetrate like a real bullet, but they hurt like hell. They'll leave you a bruise, possibly even a scar. And we induce stress either through like push-ups or jumping jacks, or we have loud music going, the lights are off, the radio's going, so that you are in those extremely stressful situations and you can make really good decisions. So for instance, we'd have them go through a scenario with very limited information under those stressful conditions, and it's a shoot or don't shoot scenario. Or we have them do target discrimination, where they go into a room full of 25 different targets and you have to figure out which target is a shoot and which one is not a shoot. Like the person holding the banana, like it's a gun, a lot of people shoot that person because...
I saw this in Men in Black. Yeah, Will Smith is really good about that. He saw the alien girl,
Yeah, exactly. Or the pregnant woman holding a gun. People don't want to shoot a pregnant woman, but she's got a gun pointed at you. So we purposely would do those situations so that people under stress can make those decisions, but also function physically, because you lose those fine motor skills in the middle of that. And the example I always give is if you're in a car accident and you have to dial 911, even me, I would have shaky fingers. I mean, people just get nervous. It's not a normal situation. So police are in those situations a lot, and they're making a lot of different decisions. There's a lot of different things going on, life or death situations. So we want to prepare them physically and mentally for those situations, and to make good decisions that aren't going to get them killed or land them in jail.
Right. And one of the things you mentioned, I want to drill this down a little deeper too, is you talk about how you don't even hear something when you get that tunnel. You talk about that in one of your situations, I think, where you were like, everything around you wasn't even going on, but you were able to execute your mission.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of situations like that, or even where you'll have memory lapses in an incident. And even if you think of a scary incident you've ever been in, usually you don't piece it together until you have a couple sleep cycles. So like 1 or 2 sleeps, and then you start to get the picture together fully. That's why there was push for when officers are involved in a shooting, the first thing they do is take their badge and gun and put them in a room and have them tell the story. Actually, there was some science saying that you should not do that because their memory is not fully formed, and they have to have it with the sleeps in order to do that.
Right.
But it's almost near impossible in today's climate around police for them to get that kind of luxury to piece together their memories. But the example I'll give is my brother again. So he had 30 years on a police department, and he actually had to shoot an offender who had held somebody hostage, beat her, raped her, ended up killing her. And the offender came out of the structure he was in and pointed a gun at the officers. Well, my brother was the first person in the stack, so they're lined up with SWAT guys. There's a guy with a shield, and then my brother's right behind him. My brother does the shooting, and the guy next to him, his ears are like blown out from the sound of the rifle.
Oh my God!
He doesn't have hearing protection.
Oh, that's nasty.
My brother, he knows he's going to shoot. His body goes into protection mode, and his ears like turn off and protect his ears, and he does not have the hearing damage. It's crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah.
The other thing he'll say, my brother, is that he thought that the road that the guy came out walking on was completely paved and smooth. He thought it was like, 10 feet. But then when he went back a few days later with the investigators, it was totally potholed situation. There were fences. It was like 40 feet where he took the shot. It was totally different from what he imagined.
Yeah.
In mind. And Dave Grossman, a military guy, writes about this in his books On Combat and On Killing, and he'll say how when people are involved in these, like they'll even be shooting their gun, and the rounds that come out look like kegs of beer. Like that's how big they'll look to people. Wow. Because it's in like slow motion. Like your mind slows down and almost puts you in slow motion. You get tunnel vision, you get the auditory exclusion, you get the fight or flight. There's a lot of things chemically that go on with your body. It's fascinating.
Wow. Yeah, certainly. Great doctor. Yeah. Dr. Bartu, she loves this stuff.
Well, I love the neuroscience behind
it. Yeah. No, it's good.
Yeah. And I think that's just important to train. Like you could have these big macho guys or gals on the job, but you need to be mentally prepared too.
Right. Okay.
It's not just a physical thing.
Yeah.
Police work requires critical thinking. I think maybe
and fast. You can't sit and you can't sit and debate it. It's got to be binary. Yes, no, right?
Yeah. And that takes experience. That takes training, and it's also a perishable skill. I mean, I've been kind of out of it for a while. I'm sure if I went and did some of these trainings, I'd be terrible.
Yeah.
Just because I've been out of that life for a while.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, it's. I do think it's a disservice on the training side from the police departments.
Right. Yeah. And what about from the master's communication, Karen? Socially, I mean, what's going on with our people out there protesting or rioting, whatnot? You have a take on that?
I worry the precedent that it's set for the next time there's some grievance that people have. You cannot have that state of civil unrest. I mean, there were threats that they were going to come into the residential neighborhoods. That would have been horrific all around. There would have been a lot of bloodshed.
Right.
So I get it. People are upset. I just don't see how the correlation between looting and rioting is going to solve anything.
Well, yeah, no, I don't think anybody. There's no logical, reason for that. That's just opportunity or something nefarious,
It seemed more about money and product and what they're going to do with the goods that they stole, and less about George Floyd. And the other thing I'll say about that, and the other thing I kind of struggle with, and I know I'm going to get beat up for saying this, is that Memorial Day weekend there was like 90 people shot in Chicago, and I don't know how many homicides out of that. And nobody's talking about that. Yeah. It's the one incident where it's police on citizen that gets talked about. So I kind of struggle with that because there's that many people shot and killed daily in Chicago that nobody's talking about.
You're not going to get beat up for that. That's another article I read. I wish I could pull it up. I lost it. It's something about proximity awareness. When something's close to us, we have a more of an emotional tug to it, right? If somebody falls in the lake and drowns in Holland, I don't care, right? If it happens in my neighborhood, I'm going to talk about it and feel bad.
Yeah.
So there's something about that proximity and video nowadays, and the whole body cam thing has come out now. That's just, it's like, what's your position on the body cam thing for officers?
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it saves more officers than harms them. Yeah, I think it's a great thing. And most progressive officers would say they'd rather have the camera, and at this point would feel uncomfortable without the camera on, because there are a lot of false complaints. There are a lot of things made against police officers that the camera helps clear up.
Nice.
So, I always liked the camera. I was fine with the camera.
Well, of course you are. You look fine on camera. It's fine. I was trying to point another way, of course.
Yeah. And so I'm not saying that the George Floyd incident isn't terrible and shouldn't have attention. It should, but also should the scenario that's going on in Chicago and other cities as far as crime.
Yeah.
I mean, 90 people shot in one weekend is ridiculous.
Yeah. It's
nice out this weekend. I have a feeling it's going to be even more people shot. So we should talk about the George Floyd, but we should also talk about that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Karen, obviously the solution is just, more gun control, right? I know how you feel about that, so I can bring it.
I think that the gun control argument is gone now, because the fact that people were threatening to come into the suburbs and residential areas of the city, you haven't heard a peep about gun control. And I don't think you're going to, because the first thing that happened were people were calling me saying, do you have guns I can borrow because they're coming to my neighborhood? And I'm like, I'm not a gun dealer.
There's no rental here.
Yeah. So I think that argument's out the window. And I was pro-gun in Chicago, pro-Second Amendment before concealed carry was even allowed.
Yeah.
Because I'm a female. I'm tall, but I'm smaller stature. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be protected. The police are minutes away when seconds count. And so I want to take it into my own hands to protect myself.
Right.
And I think the gun control discussion is out the window at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, people were hunkering down, ready to go if something were happening in the neighborhood. Yeah. You have to. You're setting such a terrible precedent.
Mm-hmm.
I can go break into the Louis Vuitton store. Of course, I would love to go break into the Louis Vuitton store. It's just a terrible precedent, though. I mean, anytime anybody has any sort of grievance, if that's the norm, that's crazy.
Yeah. You think it's other forces at work there? I see these pallets of bricks and stuff. What's your opinion on that?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I definitely think it's tied to election.
Yeah.
So, but all those other conspiracy theories, I just don't know. Yeah. I guess I wouldn't say anything's out of the question, but it's hard to say.
Wouldn't be surprised, but not doing a whole lot of research right now. It's not really important to me.
Yeah, I'm not at the tinfoil hat just yet. I'm trying to have a little bit more of a positive outlook and control what I can control.
Yeah.
But it is timed with the election, and
and
now we anything about COVID. And
yeah, right. And people are, they're protesting against violence. It would be odd for that mindset. Hey, this guy was, executed. The citizen executed in the street by the state. All I can think of is like my daughter went and protested in Glen Ellen. I'm like, go for it. I'm sure, just make sure you check your six and have an exit in case somebody shows up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, somebody. It was fine. Yeah, she was fine.
Okay.
I didn't find how many people, but it was peaceful there.
Yeah.
It's Glen Ellen. Glen Ellen.
Yeah. I mean, and I think a peaceful protest is okay.
Yeah. Well, I get a lot of images of officers and protesters holding hands and putting their shields down and saying, "Yeah, I'm with you." They're there to keep order, but they understand the emotional part of this, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And if you look at social psychology, there's studies that have that. Even if you take a group of people who don't know each other and you put some on team A and some on team B, they are going to go at each other just from a social psychology perspective. So the fact that we have citizens versus police,
right.
It's just sort of natural to be competitive against each other because you're automatically in two different groups.
I want to hear more about that. You can cite a study or something like that? It sounds crazy.
I mean, I don't know the exact study offhand, but there's a lot of studies about that where even random people, and you put them in Jersey A, Jersey B, they're going to go at each other. That's just human nature.
It's that tribal mentality. We're tribes. We want to. It's like I was analyzing this from a marketing perspective of people doing their books, which we can talk about in a minute. But a lot of people. I had this one gal who had a happiness book. I'm like, happy. Oh, it's good. We want to be more happy, but it's just so. It was so happy. I said, well, you need a nemesis in any story. You can't have light without dark, And like I said, I was looking at one of my friends is a real big. He's not a White Sox fan. He's a Cubs hater. He hates the Cubs more than he loves his own team because it's that rivalry was gave him some juice, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll find the study on that, but I do think that part of the solution is the police and citizens coming together to solve problems.
Yeah. I do. When the last things flared up, I forgot when it was, a few years ago, it talked about community policing. It was about something happened, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And getting, policemen to actually walk around the community and get to know people. And that will melt that little barrier between uniform and citizens. Like, no, that's Barney Fife. He's one of us,
Yeah, and one of the reasons I even became a police officer, one, I wanted to help people, but I remembered when I was in high school, my mom got pulled over by a cop, and he's the biggest asshole to my mother. And, he was yelling at her on the PA, embarrassing her. He was talking to her like shit. And I'm like, I will not treat people like that. I'm not going to treat people like that. And so when I went on the job, I'd like to think that I treated people with respect, and that's the way it should be.
Right.
And that has resulted in the 0 complaints against me. And that's not to say I wasn't.
No, I gotta roll some applause here. Check it out. Yeah, applause, 0 complaints.
Oh. Yeah, and that, a complaint, it doesn't necessarily mean something bad would happen. So I don't want to give that.
Well, no, I know you've had your share of altercations or arrests and stuff too, right? I mean.
But even, I had a female partner who was smaller than I for a long time, and what good is it for us to pull somebody over and talk to them like shit? What good is that going to do? We're going to escalate the situation. We're going to have to call for somebody else to help us.
Yeah.
You have to figure out other strategies to influence people and get somebody into cuffs who maybe doesn't want to go into cuffs or needs to be in cuffs.
I think you mentioned that. Can you remember one of those and share that story with us? I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, we have a situation, we laugh about it still, her and I, where, we'd have straight up gangbangers telling us that they actually respect us and we appreciate the way you treated us, and we'd be locking them up for something. And like I said, it goes back to that respect and dignity and integrity, and I think people appreciate that. And I'm not saying there's not times when you have to go hands-on and do more things, but it's because the other person is asking you to do that by their actions.
Right.
And so that was the approach that we always took. And so we didn't like to escalate situations unnecessarily.
Right.
Floyd, in that situation, they should have just got him up and out of there. There's no reason to hang around.
10 minutes, yeah. What's the point? Outside. Were they waiting? I don't know the story. Were they waiting for something?
I don't know. That's a good. Actually, now that we're talking, that is a good question. Like, what were they waiting for at that point? An ambulance or another car or the wagon? Our goal was always like, get them in the car,
out of the environment, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Because people are going to come out. People are going to start recording.
Right.
And what good is it to wait there? And what for? He's already going to jail at that point.
Right.
So,
interesting. Yeah. Okay. All right, that's great. And then I know you're, you're not a cop anymore, so we can talk about your.
But I was on radio quite a bit, and I was like, oh, I miss it.
Yeah, right. Well, you got your own podcast now. Let's hear about your podcast. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, I am still doing that. So it's a podcast geared towards women. So some of my research. So as Doug mentioned, I'm an academic and a professor, and so I do my own research. And some of my research showed that women don't often see themselves as leaders or feel like they're heard as leaders. This was overwhelming response from, a large sample size of really successful, intelligent, accomplished women who said, I don't feel like I'm seen as a leader and I don't feel like I'm heard as a leader. Mm-hmm. So I started the podcast as a way to shine a light on female leaders. So it's mostly women. I have men, of course, on there, talking about their leadership.
But they're very feminine. Okay, I get it. Sorry.
Talking about their leadership approach, talking about their career journey, talking about, challenges they faced as a female in business. Right. And it's gotten really good response. And, I think it's a good discussion because leadership is one of those like fuzzy, nebulous words.
It's a massive word with a lot of meanings, right?
Yeah. So we kind of break it down, by definition and what's worked, what doesn't work, what works for women versus what works for men, because there's nuances there, and kind of cover all of that.
Yeah, it goes back. It actually ties into my next thought, which is, as a white man, right? I'm like, oh, come on. I know I'm colorblind, all right, because last time I checked, I'm not an albino. Okay, so this is a shade of brown, light brown. Okay, so that's my viewpoint on race. Is like, come on. And when I hear about women's inequality stuff, I feel like, oh, come on, really? And like, come on, we've had, women in power, women CEOs, Meg Whitman at eBay, blah, blah, blah. But then you've told me some stories, and a couple other clients told me some stories, and I can't believe them. The dumb things that come out of people's mouths in 2020.
Yeah, and listen, my stance is to be so good they can't ignore you. I'm not saying I want a special handout or pick me because I'm a woman. That actually would be a disservice to women.
Right.
So my stance is to be so good, get the things you need, the skills, experience you need, and then be so good they can't ignore you. But that being said, if you look at the numbers, 4% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are women, but the workforce is over 50% female, over 50%, and only 4% are in leadership roles. Mm-hmm. The numbers are staggering, and yes, of course, I personally have had lots of scenarios that have happened to me in business that you're like, what the fuck? And when I'm young newbie and I don't really know that much, and I'm in an entry position, I just take it, and I don't know what to do with it.
Right.
Now in my career, I'm like, we're going to battle, and I'm going to embarrass you for being an idiot.
Don't go to war with Karen Bartucci. You're going to lose.
No,
I don't care what gender you are.
At this point, but again, going back to 25-year-old Karen, it's different, you know. And so, and if you think of like Harvey Weinstein situation and Bill Cosby, and there are men in power that are abusing it, and
for sure
victimizing women. And my whole goal is, as a female, to get you out of the victim situation, mentality, whatever it might be, and get you to be a victor in situations.
Right. And that's right. We got that word you coined here.
Victorization.
Yeah. Victorization. I love that. And obviously, Weinstein, Cosby, these are blatant abuses, criminal abuses. But I think what's fascinating to me was the subtle ones that we don't even see in the workplace. And you mentioned a couple of them when we were talking about your upcoming book. I think you said some, boardroom where somebody said something and nobody spoke up. Do you want to share that story? It was a good one.
Sure. Boardroom full of 12 or 14 men, myself and another female who actually worked for me. And she raised her hand and said, "Hey, I'd like to ask a question." And the number 2 guy in the company said, "No, you can't ask a question." And so I literally slammed my hands on the table and said, "You can ask whatever question you want to ask." And the room just fell silent. And then she asked her question, and it was fine. It was a little awkward. But then people came to me afterwards, men that were in the room, and were like, I really didn't like when he did that and when he said that. And then people went to the woman and said, I really didn't like that. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. But it's like, say something then.
Yes, that's my point. It's like you're the only one to say that was stupid and wrong, but nobody else had the balls to say anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that the hierarchy thing again, because that was the number 2 guy in the company and everybody else was below him?
Yeah, and he was just an asshole. And,
well, yeah.
A loudmouth, and he would embarrass people in meetings, so people were afraid to speak up, and so it was just that culture.
Right.
Whereas I don't care. I had nothing to lose at that point. But people say stupid shit all the time. It's not necessarily people saying stupid stuff. It's when it starts to affect like your career trajectory or getting selected for roles, or they're doing a talent review and the women are getting scrutinized more than the men are. I've been in rooms where that's happening. People don't even realize they're doing it. There's studies out there. Bring
that up. Tell about your study, and then I want to hear about a story about that one. That's, again, a nuance that has big repercussions.
Yeah, there's a study about venture capital and female entrepreneurs, and how when men go in and pitch, they're being asked about the art of the possible, what they could possibly do with this money, and what their company is going to bring in. Whereas the women are getting hammered on why should they even be considered? What experience do they possibly have? They're being hammered on things like historically, whereas the men are being asked questions in a future state and more of a possibility state, and the women are just being questioned for even being at the table. And people don't even realize they're doing it. I mean, that's the thing. It's an unconscious bias.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're gonna fix that, okay?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay.
I mean, one of the best things you can do is talk about it.
Right.
The same thing goes for race. I probably need to learn and get up to speed on that as well. I do like to think of myself as a inclusivity and diversity advocate.
Right.
But I think still I probably have things to learn when it comes to that. From a female perspective, I get it, but there's other things I need to learn.
Yeah. When I was talking to one of my other exceptionally liberal friends on Facebook the other day, and he made some statement. I'm like, "Oh, good job on being divisive." He's like, "Oh, I call him to see him." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure Martin Luther King and Gandhi did too, but he didn't you sound like a nan. He was." And it goes to like, okay, so, and I'll give you an example. A friend of mine brought up the Colin Kaepernick, I haven't pronounced his last name. This, taking a knee during the national anthem. What it was, 3 years ago or something like that. And at the time, I'm like, oh, come on, that guy's not patriotic. He's an idiot. And my black friend said, well, Doug, do you know why they had the national anthem at the stadiums? And you know when it happened? When it started? I said, no. He goes, well, the U.S. Defense Department started giving money to the NFL to fly jets over and start doing the national anthem. It's propaganda. It has nothing to do with patriotism. It's all money and propaganda for armed forces. I'm like, oh, where's the follow the money? Where's the MO? Right? I'm like, okay, I'm not 100% against it now. I still think you. I said, why don't you protest at the police station, not at the sports stadium, right? And well, that was his venue because he's at the sports stadium. He's got more audience there. I'm like, oh, okay. So it took me time to change my mind. Go, you know what? He was right. I thought he was an idiot. Now I think he's right. But that only happened because I had an open mind.
And you had a dialogue, yeah.
Yeah.
An intelligent discussion, not emotion being
right. The cognitive dissonance thing, right? I mean, you know more about it than I do.
Or confirmation bias, where you're looking for answers that support your opinion.
All my conspiracy friends are really good at that. Well, that's because of this, you know. They're really good at it.
Yeah. Well, I would never kneel at the national anthem. I understand that that's his right to do that.
Yeah. Right.
And he may have reason to do it. I'm a big supporter of the military. They fight for my freedom. And so I would never do that, but that's not to say I can judge somebody else for doing it. So
right, yeah, it was his venue, his thing. I'm like, okay, fine, yeah, I'm not gonna. Interesting stuff, man. Yeah. Okay, so your podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
Victorization.
Victorization, not victimization. We're enunciating correctly here. Victorization.
Spell check tries to correct it back to victimization, and that's what I'm trying to get away from.
Right.
Yeah, and that goes back to the police department. So when we did a lot of tactical training and combat mindset training, even when we started to train civilians, we would say that the bad guy's looking for a victim, not an opponent.
Right.
Even a school shooter. Think of an active school shooter. They're going into a school because it's full of targets.
Yeah.
Easy targets that are unarmed. And studies even show the second they're confronted by a teacher or a police officer, they either kill themselves or are killed.
Whoa.
So the bad guy's looking for victims.
Right.
And so if you carry yourself in a different way and you get out of that mindset, it changes your world. And so that's kind of the mindset that I want for women to have, is like, let's not let these things happen to us. Yep. And I'm not saying there aren't true victims out there, because there are, for sure. But I'm saying let's take the onus on us a little bit more.
Yeah.
Prepare ourselves, not that it's a battle, but prepare ourselves mentally and physically for what may or may not happen in a work situation.
Right.
You know, business is tough, you know.
Right.
There's going to be guys, there's going to be bullies.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to learn to stand up for yourself and be assertive and take a stance and have a voice and know who you are as a leader. Right. That's kind of what I'm preaching. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it either, you know.
No, we have all our opinions about different groups, right? The Democrats, Republicans, Black Lives Matter, blah, blah, blah. There's all these big groups, but if I find one chink in the armor, does that mean the whole group is wrong, or should I dismiss them?
No. And I think the same way all black people don't want to be judged the same way.
No.
All police officers don't want to be judged the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all men, white men, shouldn't be judged the same way.
That's right. I'm a minority now, I think.
I've had great male sponsorship from, white men.
Right.
So I've had great sponsorship on that side. Yeah. And you need to have that, actually, in order to succeed.
Right.
So, and I'm not out to alienate groups or people or individuals, but I will judge you subjectively if you're an asshole or not.
Okay. I'll be polite. I'll be polite. Yeah.
But yeah, again, it's because people say dumb shit all the time to me, even still at this stage of my career, but it's when it starts to affect you being selected for roles or special projects or things like pay or things like that.
Right. Yeah. I was listening to a Jordan Peterson thing talk about white privilege, whatnot. My daughters, if they watch this, they're going to yell at me, but they're like, yeah, white privilege. It's like, okay, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but there's also tall people privilege, because tall people do better than short people. Oh, there's also, thin people privilege, because fat people are looked down upon. Or what about people who are smarter? I mean, do you want to make equality for everybody who's like, no matter what their intelligence level is? Do you want the average guy working on your cataract surgery, or do you want the best?
Your brain surgery? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
I saw a tweet from a black female who was like, I don't like the term white privilege because that automatically puts me in a inferior position.
Right. Yeah. I have not experienced that. I just have my own feelings, and I have plenty of friends, and went out with a black girl. I'm like, come on, this is just all brown, light shade, dark shade, but no one's I don't have any albino friends, so I'm sorry. I'm not white. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just me.
I mean, but I do want to see it from the other side because
I do too. Yeah.
That.
Well, I'm open to conversations. We'll get another person of color on the show and talk more about this because I want to know more, so I don't say something stupid. Because
I agree.
you know,
and I also want to, if there's injustice, I want to help and be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
And that's the one thing that this is why I'm sort of like haven't watched the news and like 90% off social media now is, no one's doing anything. They're all just yap. It goes back to that bias thing, right? The confirmation bias. Like, who cares what you think? I don't.
And I bet in 2 weeks, nobody's talking about it to the degree that they're talking about it.
What's that? Talk about what?
In 2 weeks, nobody's going to be talking about it.
I hope not. I mean, I hope so. I hope no one's talking about it in 2 weeks.
Well, I mean, it's time for action.
Yeah, well, that immunity. I wish I pulled up the article. I didn't pull it for a call here, but I read it, and they cited like 12 cases of, immunity for officers that were like just egregious breaches of our constitution stuff. But they have this immunity clause where they're able to like get out of a lot of things. One example, I remember this one. They went into a drug dealer's house, right, and they found $250,000. And $50,000 went into the lockup, and $200,000 is gone, and they knew it. They knew they took it. Like, well, no, nothing.
Oh,
I mean, it's like, okay. So, was it drug? They didn't talk about the prosecution part of how the money was found, but the fact that it was stolen and then nobody cared and nobody got punished for it is like, okay, they're immune from punishment for theft.
My experience is that that's a huge deal. And
yeah.
I wouldn't even. So when you get on shift, you get your squad car keys. You go and you look at the squad car. You look at the back where the cage where prisoners are held.
Yeah.
If there was 50 cents on the floor, I would not take the 50 cents.
Wow.
So, and they do integrity checks on the police department.
They test you. They'll leave things there.
Yeah, they'll leave a $100 bill to see if you take it, or they'll leave a handgun. I don't know, or drugs to see what you do with it. So. The way I policed and the people around me would not be, and it would be a huge deal if money went missing.
Yeah.
And they would do a big investigation for that, from my experience.
Right.
Not saying it doesn't always happen and people aren't smarter in the system.
It goes back to the bad apple thing. Nothing's perfect, and it's just there's got to be a way to refine the orchard so we don't have as many bad apples out so often.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think it's a selection process and a deselection process. It's hard to fire a police officer because they're in a union.
Yeah.
So they just kind of shift them around or have them work the desk or have them guard a parking lot.
Yeah.
I think, and then the selection process needs to be better. You're giving people the ability to take away somebody's rights and life, essentially.
Right.
So the selection process should be a little bit more stringent.
I wonder how recruitment's going to be in the next few months with all this.
Who the hell would want to be a cop? I mean, you can do everything right.
It's more dangerous than joining the military right now. I mean, you think about it, their odds are bad. I mean, my former college roommate is, but he immediately went to the sheriff's department and, took some suburban shift where he wasn't in as much danger as his friends in LA. So
yeah. But when I came on the job, people were saying that too. And they were like, "Why would you want to do it?" Because cameras were just starting to come around a few years after I got on.
Yeah.
That was a huge paradigm shift, and so I think it's an evolution, and people are always going to want to help other people, hopefully. But but when I took the test, there was 20,000 people applying to be a police officer. Wow. Now it's like less than 1,000 that apply.
Oh my gosh!
People, we would fill the United Center. We filled one of the tests. The first test was just a basic kind of like mental ability test, and 20,000 people would go to take it. We filled the United Center.
Wow.
And now it's not like that anymore.
No.
And you had to get on the list, and you had to wait, and you were scored, and it was like an awesome job if you got it because you get a pension and it's a good job and insurance. And it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I was listening to the radio the other day, and this was in the middle of all the looting and riots, and they were calling for help, and there was no help. I mean, I can't think of a scarier situation as a police officer.
What? The police are calling for help?
Police are calling for help, and there's no help.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I saw the one picture of a guy got separated from his squad or something. He's by himself, and a bunch of protesters were stood around to protect him.
I saw that. Yeah. It's things like that makes you realize they're still good.
Yeah, right. Hey, there's still hope, right? So we'll focus on that. Again, folks, if you want to hear more of Karen's brilliance, her podcast is called Victorization.
Yep, available on Apple, iTunes, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
That's right. And I think we'll have you back again and talk about your upcoming book, too, but not today.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that during the future.
This is a good topic, though, to talk through.
Yeah, that was good topical. And, we just want to, people to be smart and safe out there and be calm. And listen to Karen. She knows more than most people about all these things. It's like Dr. Bartucci.
Yes.
So thank you very much for your time today, Karen. Appreciate you and appreciate what you've done. And we're going to go ahead and do a little quick video here and we're all done. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, you bet.